In a world where love feels like a prison, Emma Carter is trapped by an arranged marriage she never wanted. Desperate to escape, she fakes an injury to buy time, only to find herself falling for the man she's been avoiding. Dr. Nathan Sullivan. As secrets unravel and emotions collide, Emma must confront her fears and choose between running or embracing the love she never saw coming. Will she finally let down her walls? Stay tuned to find out. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Emma Carter gripped the edges of the dinner table, her knuckles turning white as her mother's voice rang in her ears. "You'll be marrying Nathan Sullivan in 3 weeks." The words echoed in her head, each syllable slicing through her like a cold blade. She had expected her parents to meddle in her life. Her mother always had a knack for controlling every detail of her existence. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. She scoffed, pushing back from the table so suddenly that her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Are you serious? You're selling me off like some bargaining chip?" "Sweetheart, it's not like that," her father tried to reason, his tone softer. "The Sullivans are good people, and this will strengthen our business ties. Nathan is a respectable young man. You'll have a comfortable life." "I don't need a comfortable life. I need my own life," Emma snapped, her pulse pounding in her temples. "I don't even know this guy. What if he's a complete jerk, or worse? What if he's boring?" Her mother sighed, sipping her tea as if Emma's entire future wasn't being forcefully arranged over dinner. "You'll get to know him. And I assure you, he's anything but boring." That was it. The final straw. She couldn't sit there and listen to another second of their carefully planned future for her. Without another word, she stormed out of the dining room, grabbing her car keys from the counter and heading straight for the garage. She needed air. The second she hit the gas, the tires screeched against the pavement, her sleek black sedan darting down the dimly lit streets. The cool night wind whipped through her open window, but it did nothing to calm the fire burning inside her. Marry some stranger. Spend the rest of her life shackled to a man she didn't even choose. No, she wouldn't let it happen. Her grip tightened around the steering wheel as she sped up, the city lights blurring past. She didn't even care where she was going. She just needed to escape, to drown out the noise of her parents' voices, the suffocating weight of expectation pressing down on her. Fury boiled in her veins, her foot pressing harder against the gas pedal. Then she saw it. A woman, elderly, fragile, stepping into the street. Panic shot through Emma's chest. She slammed the brakes, but the car didn't respond fast enough. Desperation kicked in, her instincts taking over as she yanked the wheel to the right. The impact wasn't deafening, but it was enough. Enough to send her body jolting forward. Enough to make her head snap against the steering wheel. Enough to turn everything around her into a blur of black and silver and the distant sound of screeching tires. Then, silence. For a few moments, everything was weightless, disconnected. A dull ringing filled her ears, and when she opened her eyes, the world tilted at a dizzying angle. Her vision was hazy, but she could make out the outlines of headlights cutting through the darkness. A voice, distant, concerned, reached her ears. "Miss, are you okay?" Emma tried to move, but pain throbbed in her forehead. Her fingers brushed against something warm and sticky. Blood. Before she could process anything else, the world around her faded into black. The next thing she knew, she was lying in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her nostrils. Bright overhead lights made her squint, and as her vision adjusted, she caught sight of someone standing beside her, tall, dark-haired, a sharp jawline that looked like it had been sculpted by the gods themselves. And then, those eyes. deep, assessing, like he was already forming a judgment about her before she could even speak. "Good, you're awake." His voice was rich, smooth, but laced with something else. Mild amusement, maybe even annoyance. Emma blinked. Who are you?" The man crossed his arms. "Dr. Nathan Sullivan." Her stomach dropped. No. Of all the doctors in the world, it had to be him. Emma's mind reeled as she stared at the man in front of her, her body frozen in disbelief. Of all people, of all doctors, why did it have to be him? The same Nathan Sullivan, her parents, were forcing her to marry. The man she had been so desperate to escape was now standing at her bedside, arms crossed, looking entirely unimpressed. "Well," he said, cocking a brow, "you look like you've seen a ghost." Emma snapped her mouth shut, quickly masking her shock. "Just didn't expect to wake up to the man my parents sold me off to," she muttered, shifting uncomfortably under the stiff hospital sheets. Nathan let out a low chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. "Sold you off. Dramatic. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. From what I've heard, you're full of surprises." His voice was smooth, but Emma caught the slight edge in it. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough to make her uneasy. She needed to regain control of this conversation. Fast. She exhaled deeply, feigning weakness as she touched her forehead. My head hurts. My whole body feels off." She groaned, making sure to add a little extra effort into her pained expression. "Doctor, be honest with me. Am I paralyzed?" Nathan gave her a long, unimpressed stare. Then he smirked. Emma did not like that smirk. "No, Miss Carter," he said slowly, tilting his head. "You are not paralyzed." Her stomach sank. Okay. Maybe she should have been more subtle. She couldn't lose her chance yet. She clutched his wrist suddenly, her fingers pressing into his skin. "Wait, are you sure? Maybe I have some hidden nerve damage. I swear, I can't feel my legs." She dramatically attempted to wiggle her toes beneath the blanket. Nathan arched an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his sharp features.
"You can't feel them."
Emma shook her head, exaggerating her distress. "Not at all." He sighed and pulled back slightly, rubbing his temple as if she were already exhausting him. "All right. If you're convinced, we'll run a few extra tests." Her heart leapt.
Was he actually buying this?
Then, without warning, Nathan reached down, pinched the skin on her calf. Hard. "Ow!" Emma yelped, jerking her leg back instinctively. Silence. Nathan leaned in slightly, his smirk deepening. "Interesting. For someone who can't feel her legs, you sure reacted quickly." Damn it. Damn it." Emma cleared her throat, forcing a sheepish laugh. "That was just a reflex. You know, muscle memory." Nathan shook his head. "Nice try." She flopped back against the pillows with a dramatic sigh. "Fine. Maybe I can feel them. But listen, I need to stay here for a few days. My parents are going to pressure me into this wedding and I just..." Nathan didn't respond right away. He simply watched her, studying her, and for the first time, there was no humor in his expression. Then he spoke, his voice quieter. "Why are you so desperate to avoid it?" Emma hesitated, caught off guard by his sudden seriousness. She looked away, staring at the IV drip next to her bed. "Because I didn't choose this," she admitted. "I don't know you. And marriage isn't something I can just accept because it benefits my parents' business." Nathan was silent for a long moment. When she finally glanced back at him, his gaze had softened, just a little. He sighed, rolling his shoulders back as if debating something. Then, much to her surprise, he nodded. "Fine," he said. Emma blinked. "Fine. I'll help you," Nathan clarified, crossing his arms again. "I'll tell your parents that you need time to recover. But on one condition." She straightened. "Name it." "You follow the hospital's rules," he said smoothly. "No sneaking around. No unnecessary drama. You act like an actual patient." Emma pursed her lips, considering. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than facing her parents right now. Finally, she flashed him a grin. "Deal." Nathan exhaled, as if already regretting his decision. "I have a feeling I'm going to regret this." Emma only winked.
Oh, definitely.
For the first time since she woke up in the hospital, Emma actually felt a little victorious. Nathan had agreed to help her, though from the way he sighed every time she spoke, he clearly wasn't thrilled about it. But she didn't care. All that mattered was that she had bought herself some time. She spent most of the morning lounging in bed, flipping through a hospital magazine she had no real interest in. Every so often, she peeked toward the door, expecting her parents to barge in and demand an explanation. But they didn't. Maybe Nathan had already worked his magic. Midway through an article about 10 ways to improve digestion, she heard a knock at the door. Before she could respond, the door swung open, and a small, bright-eyed girl with a pink bonnet stepped inside, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. Emma blinked. Hi?" The girl grinned. "Are you really sick, or are you faking?" Emma choked on air.
Excuse me?
"I heard Nurse Jenny talking about a patient who doesn't want to get married, so she's pretending she's hurt." The girl continued matter of factly. "Is that you?" Emma sputtered, feeling the blood drain from her face. Before she could come up with a lie, Nathan appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Stella," he said, giving the girl a pointed look. "Are you interrogating my patient?" Stella giggled and ran up to him, hugging his leg.
Dr. Nathan, you know I'm right.
Emma's brain stuttered. "You two know each other." Nathan sighed. "This is Stella. She's one of my favorite patients, which means she gets away with far too much." Stella beamed. "It's because I'm cute." Emma couldn't argue with that. The kid was adorable. Nathan walked further into the room, guiding Stella to sit on a chair. "What are you doing here anyway?" Stella twirled one of the floppy ears on her stuffed rabbit. "I was bored. And I wanted to meet the lady who's pretending to be sick." Emma cleared her throat, glancing toward Nathan. "Did she mention she has zero filter?" Nathan smirked. "Oh, you'll get used to it." Emma turned back to Stella and put on her most serious face. "All right. Kid, let's get something straight. I am technically sick. I was in a car accident." Stella squinted at her. "But you can walk, right?" Emma hesitated, then sighed. "Yeah, but you can't tell anyone." The little girl gasped, as if she'd just been let in on the most important secret of her life. Then, she grinned. "So you are a spy?" Nathan groaned. "Stella, she's not a spy!" "Shh." Stella held up a finger, cutting him off. "Let me dream." Emma laughed, already liking the kid. There was something about her that reminded her of herself. Playful, curious, and just a little bit of a troublemaker. For the next few minutes, Stella told Emma all about the hospital. The best places to hide from nurses, which doctors gave out extra candy, and how Nathan was secretly very nice, even though he pretended to be grumpy. "He acts like he doesn't care," Stella whispered loudly. "But I've seen him sneak out of the hospital just to buy me ice cream." Nathan pinched the bridge of his nose. "That was one time." Emma grinned.
Oh, I'm definitely holding on to that information.
Before Stella could spill any more of Nathan's secrets, a nurse poked her head into the room. "There you are. Stella, come on. It's time for your checkup." The little girl sighed dramatically. "Oh, fine." She hopped off the chair and turned to Emma. "It was nice meeting you, Miss Fake Patient. I promise I won't tell anyone your secret." Emma smirked.
I appreciate that, Agent Stella.
The girl giggled before running off with the nurse, leaving Emma alone with Nathan. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're corrupting my patient." Emma placed a hand over her heart.
What?
"Me? I'm an angel." Nathan shot her a look that clearly said liar. Still, as he stood there, something in his expression softened. "She likes you." Emma tilted her head. "Yeah, well, I like her too." Nathan hesitated, then spoke, his voice quieter. "She doesn't have a lot of people who stick around. It's good for her to have someone like you, even if it's just for a little while." Emma's playful grin faltered. There was something about the way he said it, like he was carrying a weight she couldn't see. For the first time, she wondered if there was more to Dr. Nathan Sullivan than she had assumed. Emma was starting to get comfortable in the hospital, maybe a little too comfortable. Nathan, for all his eye-rolling and exasperated sighs, hadn't ratted her out yet. Stella had become her tiny partner in crime. And best of all, her parents hadn't shown up pressuring her about the wedding. She should have known things were going too well. It all started when she decided to stretch her legs. She'd been in bed all day, and pretending to be immobile was getting boring. Nathan had stepped out, and the nurses were busy with their rounds. A little walk around the room wouldn't hurt, right? She slid her legs over the side of the bed and carefully stood. A victorious smirk crossed her lips. Still got it. She had just taken a few steps when she heard footsteps outside her room. Her heart lurched. She barely had time to scramble back into bed before the door swung open. Nathan. And he was not alone. Two of her aunts, Margaret and Vivian, trailed behind him, their sharp, eagle-like eyes scanning the room. Emma barely managed to throw the blanket over her legs before they noticed anything suspicious. "Oh, sweetheart," Aunt Margaret cooed dramatically. "Look at you, our poor little thing." Emma mustered her best tragic but brave face. She said, forcing a weak smile. Nathan shot her a look that practically screamed, "I know you were just walking." She ignored him. Vivian huffed. "You must be in such pain, darling. Your mother told us everything." "It's just horrible what happened." Emma blinked. "She did?" Nathan crossed his arms, leaning against the counter with an annoyingly smug look. "Oh yes," he said smoothly. "Your parents were very concerned. They asked me to take extra precautions. You must not move too much." Emma's eye twitched. She knew exactly what he was doing. He was punishing her for trying to sneak around. Margaret clutched her pearls. Nathan smiled, smug, charming, and completely insufferable. "I do my best." Emma clenched her teeth. Vivian sniffed dramatically. "We were just telling your dear mother how fortunate you are, Emma. Not only do you have a devoted doctor taking care of you, but soon you'll have him as a husband too. Emma choked on air. Nathan patted her back, way too pleased with himself. Easy there, Miss Carter. You don't want to make your condition worse. Her condition. The fake one. She shot him a glare, but he only smirked. Margaret clapped her hands. Well, we won't exhaust you, dear. We just had to see you for ourselves. Rest up and don't worry about a thing. Your wedding is in good hands. Emma smiled through gritted teeth. Oh, yeah. As soon as they left, she flung the blanket off and pointed an accusing finger at Nathan. You did that on purpose. Nathan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Did what? Played along. Made sure they really believed I was helpless. He shrugged. You were helpless. Emma groaned, throwing a pillow at him. He caught it effortlessly. Why do you enjoy making my life miserable? She huffed. Nathan smirked. I don't. I just enjoy catching you in your own lies. She flopped back against the pillows, glaring at the ceiling. You're insufferable. He chuckled. And yet, I'm the one keeping you out of that wedding. See in order? Emma groaned, covering her face. I take back everything nice I ever thought about you. Nathan only laughed as he turned to leave. But before he stepped out, he paused. Oh, and by the way, he added casually, if you are going to sneak around, maybe try not to leave footprints on the floor next time. Emma bolted upright. Wait. But he was already gone. She looked down. Sure enough, faint footprints from her bare feet were still on the hospital tile. She groaned, flopping back down. She was never going to hear the end of this. Emma was starting to think that Nathan Sullivan had made it his life's mission to mess with her. Ever since her aunt's unexpected visit, he had taken every opportunity to remind her of her so-called condition. He made a show of fluffing her pillows, adjusting her blankets, like she was some fragile doll, and worst of all, he always gave her that smug little smirk like he was waiting for her to slip up. She wanted to strangle him. But something else was bothering her, something she couldn't quite shake. Lately, she had started noticing things about him. The way he rolled up the sleeves of his white coat, revealing strong forearms. The way his voice dipped lower when he was being serious, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. The way he was so annoyingly good at his job. Calm, precise, effortlessly in control. And then there was the way he was with Stella. Emma had never been the type to swoon over a man, but watching Nathan with that little girl did something strange to her. He was soft with her in a way she hadn't expected, patient and warm. Whenever Stella ran up to him, he would kneel down to her level, listening to whatever story she had to tell with genuine interest. One afternoon, as Emma sat in her wheelchair near the hospital garden, Stella appeared beside her, munching on a lollipop. You like him, the little girl stated matter-of-factly. Emma almost choked. Excuse me? Stella licked her candy. You like Dr. Nathan. Emma scoffed. I do not. Stella gave her a knowing look. You do. Emma crossed her arms. Okay, what makes you think that? Stella counted on her fingers. 1, you look at him a lot. 2, you smile when he talks, even when he's being mean. And 3, she grinned mischievously. Your face gets all red when I say you like him. Emma's hand flew to her cheeks. Betrayers. Stella giggled.
See? You totally like him.
Emma huffed. Fine. Stella shrugged. Whatever you say. Before Emma could argue further, the sound of Nathan's voice made her stomach flip. I interrupting something? She turned to find him standing nearby, one hand tucked into his coat pocket, the other holding a cup of coffee. He was watching her with that infuriating, unreadable expression, the one that made her feel like he could see right through her. Emma straightened. Nope, Stella was just telling me ridiculous things. Nathan arched a brow. Is that so? Stella grinned. I was just saying how Miss Bella here likes. Emma clamped a hand over Stella's mouth.
Nothing? She was saying nothing?
Nathan's lips twitched. Right? Emma dropped her hand, sighing. Do you need something, doctor? He handed her the cup of coffee. Drink this. You've barely eaten today. Emma blinked, surprised. You brought me coffee? Nathan shrugged, looking anywhere but her. You need caffeine. Stella gasped dramatically.
Dr. Nathan? Are you being nice?
Nathan shot her a look. Don't start. Emma hid a smile as she took a sip. It was exactly how she liked it. Strong, with just a hint of caramel. How'd you know my coffee order? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Nathan smirked. I'm a doctor. I notice things. Emma rolled her eyes, but her heart did a stupid little flutter anyway. Maybe, just maybe, Stella was onto something. Emma told herself she was overthinking it. So what if Nathan had brought her coffee? He was a doctor. He probably did things like that for all his patients. It didn't mean anything. And so what if he always seemed to be around, checking in on her, finding little excuses to stay and talk? He was just fulfilling his duties, right? That's what she kept telling herself. But then Valentine's Day arrived, and everything changed. It started with a knock on her door early that morning. Emma, still half asleep, groaned.
Who is it?
No answer. She sighed, pushing herself up and rubbing her eyes before calling out again. I swear. If this is Stella trying to play matchmaker again. The door creaked open, and a nurse walked in. Behind her was a group of women, patients, nurses, even a few visitors, all carrying stacks of envelopes. Emma blinked. What's this? One of the women stepped forward, looking shy. Miss Carter, could you give these to Dr. Nathan? We were too nervous to hand them over ourselves. Emma stared at the mountain of love letters piling onto her bedside table. Her groggy brain took a second to process. Wait, you're telling me all of these are for Nathan? The woman nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. He's just so handsome, and kind. And Emma held up a hand. Yeah, I get it. The group thanked her, then shuffled out, leaving Emma to stare at the evidence of Nathan's popularity. She clicked her tongue, grabbing one of the letters and flipping it between her fingers. Of course, he had a fan club. He was practically a walking romance novel cliché. Brooding doctor, stupidly good, looking, a little arrogant but secretly kind. Women loved that. Not that she cared. Not that it bothered her. She huffed, shoving the letters into a pile. She wasn't jealous. Why would she be? Then, a thought hit her, and she hesitated. Did Nathan expect her to give him a love letter? Her stomach twisted. That would explain why he'd been acting different lately. The coffee, the lingering glances, the way he never seemed to leave her alone. Was he waiting for her to confess? She glanced toward her bedside drawer, where a neatly folded letter lay tucked away. She had written it last night. Just a simple note. But now, she felt ridiculous. She grabbed the letter, hesitating only a moment before tearing it straight down the middle. Then again. And again. And again, until it was nothing but scraps in her hands. There. It didn't matter. It never mattered. She was just his patient. He was just a doctor. End of story. Later that afternoon, Nathan found her sitting in the hospital garden, staring at the koi fish in the small pond. He walked up beside her, hands in his coat pockets. "You're avoiding me." Emma scoffed. "You're imagining things?" Nathan hummed. "Funny, you usually have some snarky comment ready." She shrugged. "Maybe I'm tired." He studied her for a moment. "Did something happen?" Emma hesitated, gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "No." Nathan sighed, reaching into his pocket. "Well, in that case..." He pulled out a small envelope and held it out to her. Emma frowned. "What's that?" "My Valentine's letter," he said simply. Her heart skipped. She swallowed. "Oh, you don't need to." Nathan smirked. "Relax. It's not from me. It's from Stella." Emma blinked, then let out a small, breathy laugh. "Of course it is." She took the envelope, tracing the edges with her fingertips. Nathan stuffed his hands back into his coat. "I thought you'd appreciate it. You know, since you seem to like collecting love letters." Emma narrowed her eyes. "I hate you." He grinned. "No, you don't. And the worst part..." He was right. Emma had spent weeks avoiding one wedding, only to find herself being dragged into it anyway. Her parents barely gave her a chance to breathe before breaking the news. Her wedding was still happening. The date was set. The arrangements were finalized. And to her horror, her supposed fiancé had not backed out. She had tried everything, playing the injured patient, buying time, even considering actual escape. But it had all been pointless. Now, she was seated in front of a mirror in a luxurious bridal suite, her reflection almost unrecognizable beneath layers of lace and silk. The weight of the wedding gown pressed down on her like chains. She felt numb. "I can't believe this is happening," she muttered under her breath, gripping the edge of the vanity table. Sophia, her best friend and maid of honor, hovered behind her, watching cautiously. "You could still run." Emma let out a humorless laugh. "My parents have practically stationed guards outside." Sophia sighed, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "Maybe..." "He's not that bad?" Emma shot her a deadpan look through the mirror.
Seriously?
Sophia shrugged. "I mean, think about it. He knows about your accident and still agreed to marry you. Either he's desperate, or he's actually decent." Emma frowned. That was strange. If her so-called fiancé still wanted to marry her, even believing she was wheelchair-bound, then what kind of man was he? She barely had time to dwell on it before a soft knock came at the door. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes, Miss Carter," a wedding coordinator announced. Emma's stomach twisted. Sophia squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, I've got your back." With a deep breath, Emma nodded, though her heart felt like it was hammering against her ribs. A few minutes later, she found herself being wheeled down the aisle, her father pushing her chair forward while guests whispered and exchanged glances. Emma barely noticed them. Her eyes were locked on the groom, standing at the altar. Her breath hitched. No. No. This had to be a joke. Nathan. Nathan. She blinked rapidly, thinking she must be hallucinating. But no. There he was, standing tall in a perfectly tailored suit, looking at her with a calm, unreadable expression. Her mind short-circuited. What the hell is happening? When she reached the altar, she barely registered the collective gasp from the crowd as she shot to her feet, forgetting all about her supposed injury. Nathan? His lips twitched slightly. You seem to be walking just fine, Miss Carter. Emma felt like her brain had left her body. You, what? Why? She turned wildly, her eyes landing on her parents. Did you know about this? Her mother's expression was a mix of amusement and victory. Sweetheart, we knew from the moment you stepped into that hospital that you were faking it. Emma gawked. What? Nathan cleared his throat, drawing her attention back to him. His eyes held something she couldn't quite place. Something almost fond. I knew too, he admitted. I played along because I wanted to see how far you'd take it. Emma's jaw dropped. You... what? Nathan smirked, and somewhere along the way, I realized something. She narrowed her eyes.
That I'm a brilliant actress.
That I didn't want you to run. Her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as his words sank in. This whole time, every argument, every smirk, every stupid, infuriating moment between them, it had all led here. To this. To him. The priest cleared his throat. So, are we continuing with this wedding? Emma stared at Nathan, heart racing. Then, with a resigned sigh, she turned back to the priest. Well, I can't back out now. Apparently, my groom is a scheming mastermind. Nathan grinned. You'll thank me later. And somehow, Emma knew. He was probably right. Emma's mind was still reeling as she stood at the altar, staring at the man she had spent weeks trying to escape, only to realize that she had been running straight toward him all along. Nathan Sullivan, her supposed stranger of a fiancé. The man she had labeled as some business pawn, some faceless groom her parents had chosen for her without a second thought. And yet, he had never been a stranger. He had been there all along, watching her, testing her, waiting for her to figure it out. Emma wasn't sure if she wanted to scream or laugh. She settled for narrowing her eyes at him. You tricked me. Nathan gave her a slow, knowing smirk, the kind that infuriated her from the moment they met. You made it very easy. She clenched her fists, ignoring the way her pulse skipped.
So what? This was some elaborate game for you?
His expression softened slightly. No. He exhaled. At first, I just wanted to see how far you'd take it, but then... He hesitated, his gaze flickering over her face, unreadable. Then I realized I didn't want you to leave. Emma's breath caught. The priest cleared his throat. Well... The crowd let out a few nervous chuckles, all eyes locked on her, waiting. Emma turned back to Nathan, her mind spinning. She thought about the hospital, the way he always seemed to be there, challenging her, teasing her, making her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. She thought about the way he looked at Stella, the way he made her feel safe, the way he saw through every one of Emma's defenses without even trying. She had spent so long fighting against this wedding, fighting against him. But now, she wasn't so sure what she was fighting for anymore. With a sigh, she turned back to the priest. Well, I can't exactly run now, can I? She shot Nathan a look. My doctor would be very disappointed. Nathan's lips twitched, devastated. The priest smiled. Then let's proceed. And just like that, the wedding Emma had tried so hard to escape became the one moment she would never forget. When Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands were steady, warm, familiar. When she looked up into his dark eyes, something inside her shifted, like the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. Maybe she had been running all along, but she had been running home. The wedding had been surreal. One moment, Emma was trying to escape it. The next, she was standing at the altar, slipping a ring onto Nathan Sullivan's finger. And now she was married to a man she still wasn't sure whether she wanted to kiss or strangle. The reception was a blur. Congratulations, laughter, clinking glasses. Everyone seemed thrilled by the unexpected twist in their love story, as if they had known all along that she and Nathan were meant to end up together. Everyone except her. She still wasn't sure what to make of all this. Her parents were smug. Sophia had barely contained her laughter. Even Stella, in her tiny flower girl dress, had smirked at her like she was in on some grand secret. But the worst part, Nathan had barely left her side. He didn't hover, didn't make a big show of their newlywed bliss, but he was there, a steady presence at her arm, always within reach, like he was waiting for her to accept what had just happened. She wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. So, naturally, she did what any rational woman would do on her wedding night. She locked herself in the bathroom. Emma pressed her hands against the cool marble countertop, exhaling slowly. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had spent weeks planning her escape, convinced that marrying a stranger would be the worst thing imaginable. But Nathan wasn't a stranger. And that was the problem. Because now, she couldn't pretend that this was just some empty arrangement. Couldn't pretend that her heart hadn't reacted when he'd looked at her at the altar. A knock at the door made her jolt. Emma. Nathan's voice, low and calm. She stared at the door like it might magically disappear. "Go away," she muttered. A pause. Then, "You do realize we're married, right?" Unfortunately. A chuckle.
And you do understand that you can't just live in the bathroom?
Emma groaned, rubbing her temples. "Give me a minute, husband." Silence. Then, "I'll give you 5. She heard his footsteps retreating. Emma exhaled. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. She glanced at herself in the mirror, at the wedding dress she was still wearing, at the rings on her finger that felt heavier than they should. Then, with one last deep breath, she unlocked the door and stepped out. Nathan was standing by the window of their hotel suite, hands in his pockets, tie loosened. He looked completely relaxed, like a man who had expected her to run but had also expected her to come back. Infuriating. His gaze flicked to her. So, done hiding. Emma crossed her arms. "For now." He smirked. "Progress." She scowled. "Don't start." Nathan just studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the couch. "Sit." Emma arched a brow. "Excuse me? I assume you'd rather talk than, consummate the marriage." His lips twitched, as if he enjoyed watching her entire face burn. Emma grabbed a pillow and hurled it at him. Nathan caught it effortlessly. "Fine," she grumbled, sitting down. "Talk." He sat across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let's make a deal." She narrowed her eyes. "Another one." He nodded. "Neither of us expected this. And I know you don't trust me yet." Emma swallowed. She hated how easily he read her. "So," he continued, "I won't push you. No expectations. No pressure. We take this one step at a time. She stared at him, searching for the catch. And in return, you try. His voice was quiet but firm. Try to see where this goes. Try to see if there's something here. Emma's throat tightened. Because deep down, she knew the truth. There was something here. And maybe she was finally ready to stop running from it. Emma had spent the last few days convincing herself that Nathan Sullivan was nothing more than an obstacle she had to tolerate, a necessary evil tied to her parents' business interests and the ridiculous arrangement she had been forced into. Every interaction with him felt like a tug of war, her stubbornness fighting against the reality of the situation, and his quiet persistence chipping away at her resistance. But something inside her was beginning to shift. It started with small moments. The way Nathan never pushed her when she pulled away, but always seemed to be there when she needed him. The way he carefully poured her coffee, despite the teasing comments she made about it being a bizarre wedding gift. The way he didn't flinch when she tried to brush off their connection with sarcasm. Instead, he smiled in that way that made her insides do flips, as if he could read every single one of her defenses and wasn't fazed by them. Nathan had kept his word. He didn't push. They spent the last few days in a strange, tentative peace. The tension between them was still there, but it was more like a quiet hum, a reminder that something was slowly building between them, something neither of them had planned for. And yet, the thought of letting him in felt like a betrayal of everything she had convinced herself she wanted. Emma had come into this marriage thinking she would be the one to control it, to use it as a stepping stone, to get her parents off her back and then walk away. But now, every time she looked at Nathan, something gnawed at her, a pull, an invisible force that drew her closer, even as she tried to resist it. That night, as they sat together in their hotel suite, the air between them felt heavier than usual. Nathan had been quiet for most of the evening, and Emma, still trying to find her footing, had retreated into the safety of her own thoughts. She glanced over at him, and for the first time, the words that had been circling in her mind finally broke free. "Nathan," she said quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty, "do you think this could ever be real?" His gaze met hers, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back against the couch, rubbing his hand across his jaw, as though considering his response carefully. "I think we've spent a lot of time pretending, Emma," he said slowly, his voice low. "But if I'm being honest," he paused, searching her face, "I don't want to pretend anymore, not with you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words got stuck, as if the truth of the moment had overwhelmed her. Nathan was looking at her with such intensity, his gaze softening, and for the first time, she wondered if he had been waiting for her to admit what she was only now beginning to realize. This wasn't just some arranged marriage. This wasn't just about pleasing her parents or checking off boxes on a list of expectations. There was something between them. Something real, undeniable. And the more she denied it, the more it felt like a weight on her chest. Nathan's voice broke through her thoughts. "I know you're scared, Emma. You've been scared for a long time. But you don't have to be scared anymore." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. He was right. She had been running from this, from him, since the moment she'd met him. But now, sitting here with him, the walls she'd built around herself were beginning to crumble. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to trust again." Nathan moved closer, his hand gently brushing hers. "Then let me show you," he said softly. "Let me be the one to help you learn." The sincerity in his voice melted the last of her resistance. She wasn't sure when it happened. When her walls had finally crumbled, or when the fear of what could be had finally faded into something she could grasp. But in that moment, Emma realized something she hadn't been willing to admit to herself. She had fallen for Nathan Sullivan, and no matter how hard she fought it, there was no turning back now. With a quiet breath, she reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. "Show me, Nathan," she said softly, her heart pounding in her chest. And as his lips brushed against hers in a kiss that was soft but filled with everything unsaid, Emma knew that this was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them had planned. Something real, something worth fighting for. Emma had never been so confused in her life. Every decision she had made up until this point had been about avoiding the inevitable. Avoiding Nathan, avoiding the wedding, avoiding what she now realized was her own heart. But now, as she sat in the quiet of their hotel room, the realization hit her harder than she could have ever imagined. She had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Nathan, the man she had been so desperate to escape, had somehow become the one person she couldn't ignore. The more she tried to push him away, the more he pulled her in, with his quiet persistence and that impossible calmness in the face of her resistance. And now, as they both stood on the precipice of something neither had expected, Emma was beginning to understand just how much he had affected her. How much she had affected her. How much she had changed since they first met. It wasn't just that he was there, always by her side when things got tough. It wasn't just the way he made her feel seen, not as a burden or a piece of property to be traded off, but as a woman who deserved to make her own choices, to find her own path. Nathan's presence in her life had become a constant, even when she tried to deny it. She could no longer pretend she wasn't falling for him. She sat at the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her thoughts were a whirlpool of uncertainty. Was she ready to let go of the past? Was she ready to let go of the past? Was she ready to trust again? To let someone in? She looked up when she heard the soft sound of the door opening. Nathan stepped inside, his eyes immediately seeking hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice carrying that same tone of concern and care that had melted her defenses over the past few days. "We need to talk." Emma nodded, her throat suddenly tight. This was it. The moment where everything would either fall apart or fall into place. "I know we've been avoiding the truth," he continued, taking a few steps closer. "I know you've been scared, and I know you've been scared, and I understand why. You've been hurt before, and you've built walls around yourself to protect your heart. But I need you to know something." Emma swallowed, her voice a whisper. "What?" Nathan sat down next to her, his hand resting lightly on her knee. His touch was warm, grounding. "I'm not going anywhere. I know you're not ready to trust me completely yet. But I promise, I'm here for the long haul. I'm not asking you to jump into something you're not ready for. I just need you to see that this is real. That what we have is real." The sincerity in his voice, the depth of emotion in his eyes, made Emma's heart flutter uncontrollably. She had spent so much time running from this, from him, that she hadn't stopped to realize that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what she needed. "I don't know how to do this, Nathan," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to love someone again, not after everything." He reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his thumb lingering on her cheek. "You don't have to do it alone. Not anymore." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek, and Nathan gently wiped it away. "I'm not going to let you carry this burden by yourself. We'll take it one step at a time. I'll be here every step of the way." Emma felt something shift inside her, something she hadn't felt in so long. It was the feeling of hope, the feeling that maybe it was time to stop running, to stop hiding from what she truly wanted. She looked at Nathan, the man who had become both her unexpected enemy and her unexpected salvation. "I'm scared," she whispered, words a confession she wasn't sure she was ready to say. "I know," Nathan said softly, "but we'll face it together." Emma closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. She could trust them. When she opened her eyes again, she met Nathan's gaze, the same certainty in his eyes that she had seen the first time they truly talked. "Okay," she whispered, her voice steady. "Let's do this. Together." Nathan smiled, a smile that reached his eyes and melted Emma's heart all over again. He leaned forward, brushing his lips gently against hers, sealing their promise with a kiss that was both tender and full of something deeper, something real. And as they pulled away, Emma knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. No more walls. No more running. Only them. Only the future they would build together. Weeks had passed since Emma had let herself fully open up to Nathan. Their relationship had shifted into something unexpectedly beautiful. Something real. And every day brought her closer to a version of herself she hadn't known was possible. No more hiding. No more pretending. The wall she had spent years building had crumbled, and she had allowed herself to trust Nathan, to love him in a way she never thought she could again. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, times when the past would rear its ugly head, and Emma would wonder if maybe she had made a mistake, if she was rushing into something too soon. But every time she looked at Nathan, every time he smiled at her with that warmth in his eyes, she knew, deep down, that this was the right choice. Tonight they were sitting together on the balcony of their apartment, a cool breeze ruffling Emma's hair as she leaned against the railing, her thoughts quiet for once. Nathan sat beside her, his hand casually resting on hers, the silence between them comfortable and full of meaning. For the first time in ages, Emma felt a peace she hadn't thought was possible. She had spent so long running, so long trapped by her own fears and insecurities, but now, with Nathan by her side, she felt like she was finally living, not just existing. "You've been quiet," Nathan said, his voice breaking the silence, his thumb tracing small circles on her hand. "What are you thinking about?" Emma turned to look at him, the familiar warmth of his gaze instantly pulling her in. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How much I've changed." Nathan raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at his lips.
For there, I hope.
She chuckled, the sound light and free. "Definitely for the better. I've learned a lot about myself. About what I'm capable of. What I deserve." Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment she saw something deeper in his expression. A recognition of their shared journey, a reflection of how much they had both grown. "And mostly, I've learned that I'm not as scared as I used to be. And mostly, I've learned that I'm not as scared as I used to be." Nathan's smile softened, his gaze growing more intense. "You never had to be scared. Not with me." Emma took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She'd spent so much of her life running from love, from vulnerability, terrified of what it meant to truly let someone in. But Nathan had shown her that love wasn't something to fear. It wasn't a trap or a burden. It was a gift, one that made her stronger, not weaker. "I've been thinking about the future," Emma said, her voice quiet but steady. "About us." Nathan tilted his head, studying her with that thoughtful, probing gaze. She smiled, a sense of certainty filling her chest. I think. We build something real, something we both choose. No more pretending. Just us. His hand tightened around hers, his expression serious now. I'm in this for the long haul, Emma. Whatever it takes. Her heart fluttered in her chest as she leaned in closer, her forehead resting gently against his. I know. And I'm not going anywhere either. The city stretched out before them, the lights twinkling like stars in the distance, but in that moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of them, the quiet hum of the world around them, and the future they would build together. Emma had never thought she would find love in the way she had with Nathan. It wasn't some grand, sweeping romance, but something more. It was real. It was grounded. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. As Nathan's lips brushed against her temple, she whispered, I'm glad I stopped running. He smiled against her skin. Me too. And with that, Emma knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. One that was just theirs to write. The journey Emma went through teaches us a powerful lesson about vulnerability, trust, and love. At the start of her story, Emma was locked in a battle with her own heart, running from a marriage that seemed to control her destiny. Her fears, insecurities, and past heartbreaks made her build walls, keeping herself distant from the love that was right in front of her. But through time, persistence, and a little help from someone who truly cared, she learned that opening up doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger. Love isn't something that just happens overnight. It takes patience, understanding, and, most importantly, trust. Nathan showed Emma that real love isn't about grand gestures or perfection. It's about being there for each other through the ups and downs, supporting each other's growth and building something real together. The story is a reminder that sometimes the things we fear the most, like letting someone else in, can lead to the most rewarding experiences. We're all capable of growth, of healing, and of finding love that makes us better versions of ourselves. So, what did you learn from Emma and Nathan's journey? How do you navigate vulnerability and trust in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the story and want more, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let us know where you're watching from and join the conversation. Stay tuned for more stories and lessons that can change the way we view love, life, and everything in between.